The Dawson Trail was Canada's first all-Canadian access road to the West, and inherently one of the most defining and pivotal moments in a young nation's history. Its routes run far and wide, with its legacy being one of both national and provincial significance. My name is Pierrette Sherwood, a Métis descendant of the Cree Nation and Carrière family of the early Red River Colony. I am also the founder of the Dawson Trail Commemorative Project, initiated in 2019 with a goal to revive the history of the Dawson Trail. Despite its significance as Canada's first all-Canadian road into the Great Northwest, as the territory came to be known in its early years under the Hudson's Bay Empire, the road and its history had lain relatively dormant for almost 150 years until our commemorative project was launched in 2023. With the help of heritage consultant Mireille Lamontagne and a small but passionate group of community residents, we set out to implement a multifaceted, multi-phased project that can now be enjoyed through our website at dawsontrailtreasures.ca and on the landscape, with 15 permanent interpretive trail markers and 8 artistic exhibits located over 150 kilometers along the historic trail from the northwest angle at the Lake of the Woods to St. Boniface in Winnipeg, Manitoba, the original terminus of the trail. Our work highlights the people, places, and events that had a role in the coming of the road and its impact on communities already established along the way. The commemorative project alone cost us $712,000 to develop. The magnitude of this kind of project is so big and complex that it could only be achieved as a labor of love. It has certainly been a great personal journey in my life, and my wish is that our shared history, including the Dawson Trail story, continues to inspire growth, compassion, and knowledge collectively. So thank you for being here today. I would like to acknowledge that the Dawson Trail history reaches into the ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, Nahineewak, Nakota, and Dakota, and the homeland of the Red River Métis. I equally recognize that the Dawson Trail crosses Treaty 3 and Treaty 1 territories from east to west, and that its origins are as a First Nations trail with intimate ties to the negotiation of these treaties and the resistance of the Red River Métis. I'm here with respect for local Indigenous communities in this land to deepen our understanding of First Nations and move forward from the violence and hate perpetrated with the coming of the Dawson Trail to nurturing multiple perspectives of its history in a spirit of love, respect, and compassion. The Dawson Trail Commemorative Project is committed to learning and redressing the traditional narratives of history so that these perspectives may become more inclusive and contribute to a sense of healthy pride and healing within our communities. In introducing the Dawson Trail Commemorative Project, one needs to understand that the original trail was both a land and water route, starting in Thunder Bay on Lake Superior to Fort Garry or Winnipeg, a distance of 850 kilometers or 530 miles. Only 240 kilometers or 150 miles of this road was actually on land, while the rest was on water. The interpretive markers and exhibits start at the northwest angle at the borders of Manitoba and Ontario and the Angle Inlet, USA, and end in St. Boniface at the heart of Winnipeg, Manitoba. These landmarks are divided on the map into 4 distinct sections, with each one highlighting distinct features of the history and landscape. In breaking the road up into these themes, each section becomes easier to navigate as a tourism experience and fits into a day trip or excursion for your next road trip with friends and family. Maps and tourism itineraries are equally available on our website at dawsontrailtreasures.ca. Each distinct section of the trail is identified by an icon or silhouette at the foot of each interpretive marker. They include 1. The horse for markers 1 to 5 in the southeast corner of the province from Richer to the northwest angle at Lake of the Woods. 2. The beaver on markers 6 to 9 throughout an area once referred to as Mistamiskano in Anishinaabemowin, and the Great Beaver Way, or what is now known as the town of St. Anne and municipality of St. Anne to Richer, Manitoba. The bison on markers 10 to 12 through Dufresne and Lorette in the RM of Taché, and finally the Cartwheel Brigade at markers 13 to 15 from Prairie Grove in the RM of Springfield to the Seine River in St. Boniface at the heart of the original Red River colony of the 1800s. In developing the content for the interpretive trail, we sought the invaluable retroactive feedback and input from a content advisory committee consisting of representatives from Treaty Councils 1 and 3, elders as well as local knowledge keepers and Métis locals. This enriched the Indigenous content of our interpretive trail significantly. This said, much of what you will learn in terms of content on the markers cannot be found on the website. In fact, much of this interpretive content reveals facts and local knowledge never before made public about the history of the trail and its many hidden treasures. So pay attention here as I share with you today some of the highlights of these hidden treasures. My focus here today will be on the highlights of key Indigenous people, places, and events that we touch upon on the trail. Harrison Creek at the northwest angle is a very special place. It rests on the north shores of the Lake of the Woods, central to everyday life and spirituality for the Anishinaabe since time immemorial. Its northwest angle inlet had been prominent in pre-colonial trade. By 1732, the region served as a base from which the French Empire projected its ambitions westward, with La Vérendrye establishing Fort Charles on a nearby island, later determined to be in the USA. Later, from 1857 to the early 1900s, the northwest angle served as a trailhead to the Red River settlement on the Dawson Trail, used as a gateway by thousands of Canadian settlers traveling west. Once home to the hustle and bustle of an HBC post and travelers, it now lies abandoned and empty, completely vacant of any buildings. Still, there is a unique sense of place here, where 1,400 Anishinaabe gathered on October 3rd of 1873 to witness the signing of Treaty No. 3. A right-of-way for Canada had been granted in 1871, and while the road was functional by this point, the development of dams and canals along the waterways had leaders expressing concern about the potential harmful effects of their fisheries. Despite these concerns, Treaty No. 3, as published by Canada, included but one statement about the fisheries. This differed from notes committed to paper and memory during negotiations. Joseph Nolin, a Métis leader from the influential Nolin family in St. Anne, Manitoba, had been hired by Chief Dawson to record the agreement in a document now known as the Paypalm document. According to his notes, the Anishinaabe rights were guaranteed to be, quote, free as by the past, unquote, for, quote, as long as the sun will shine and waters run, that is to say, forever, and mentions nothing about land surrenders. Soon after the treaty, unrestricted, non-Indigenous commercial fishing nearly destroyed the lake's fish populations, with little regard for Anishinaabe, who faced increasing restrictions and starvation by the 1890s. Another nugget of information that was recently unveiled to us is that the Michif name for Harrison Creek, or Crique de Harrison, was so named after one of the first Métis settlers to the area, a fellow by the name of Damas Harrison, who settled here with his wife, Hélène Jérôme, in the late 1800s. Damas had been a packer, or someone who prepares and packs food for transportation and sale, before the Dawson Trail period. He was a giant of a man, and it was said he could carry 1,000 pounds of furs and goods to Winnipeg. Moving westward at the junction of East Braintree Road and Highway 503, we have Marker 2, close to the original Birch River Station. There were 5 such stations along the trail where weary travelers could rest, eat, and find basic provisions for the journey. Here by the Birch River, we learn that the nearby Caribou Bog was so named after the woodland caribou that migrated this far south until the 1940s. This area's biome is rich in moss, reeds, sedges, heather, and common bog plants, including peat moss, pitcher plants, and orchids which thrive in nutrient-deficient soil. The purple pitcher plant collects rainwater and absorbs nutrients from its insect prey. Indigenous communities use it in their healing practices for its medicinal properties that may affect pain sensation, reduce blood sugar, and protect against certain viruses. Also in the southeastern Manitoba region, we learn of Anishinaabe identified as the Red Lake Chippewas at Fort Dufferin, or Emerson, Manitoba, during the North American Boundary Commission from 1872 to 1876. They moved in seasonal rounds across their territory, which crossed the international border, or medicine line, enforced between Canada and the U.S. just 80 kilometers south of Dawson Trail. The border separated families, but they found ways to stay connected. At Marker 3, we learned of Pashandibu Sibi, the traditional place name for the Broken Head River, which means river of the bald or scalped head in Anishinaabe. When Manitoba was a postage stamp province from 1870 to 1851, its eastern border was between the Broken Head and Whitemouth rivers. There was a Dawson Trail station and keeper at both crossings. It is here that we highlight the fact that Ojibways worked on the construction of the trail. A report by the Minister of Public Works to the House of Commons in July 1871 states, and I quote, "They bring their families with them and put up their wigwams in the vicinity of their work, and I have much satisfaction in saying they are among the best and steadiest laborers we have had." Westward to marker number 4, near La Coulée Saint-Onge, or Saint-Onge's Creek, named after one of the few Métis families who came here in 1877 and 78 from their neighboring Thibaultville or Richer. The small river here is sometimes called Little Broken Head or Cripple Creek. It flows from the south out of the Masqueg du Diable or Devil's Swamp. It is here, among other stories, that we share the heartwarming accounts of a man called Joseph Kashawa, later dubbed the hero of the Great Fire of 1897. This fire broke out on October 2nd and destroyed what remained of the old-growth forest. The men were away at work when it struck. Mrs. Goddard saw it approaching and took her 6 children down to the house cellar for safety, but they would have perished had it not been for an Anishinaabe man from Fort Alexander, today's Sakiik First Nation, and St. Anne. Joseph Kashawa, described as a man of faith and bravery, spotted them and rushed to get them out, arriving just in time before the roof collapsed. He tucked the baby under his arm and led them through smoke and flames to safety at Lac Bossé, as their house, stable, horses, and harnesses were enveloped in flames. Roger Goddard, a community elder of Richer and son to one of the young girls saved in the fire, was reunited with Kashawa's own great-great-grandchild, Julie Carver, in 2021. Before arriving in Richer, we invite you to visit the Dawson Trail Park. 2 large artistic murals are featured here. The metal mural facing north is titled Dawson Trail, The Journey West. I was commissioned by the Dawson Trail Commemorative Project to create this art piece. It brings to light the determination of those intrepid travelers who dared to make the journey on the Dawson Trail and honors the resilience and courage of First Nations and Métis whose lives were forever changed by this coming of the all-Canadian road to the west. On the flip side, artist Mo Sherwood provides his interpretation of the forest industry and lumber in the area and his take on the famous story of the lost gold that still animates our curiosity and remains missing along the trail today. Onward to the Dawson Trail Museum, where you can admire a 14-foot map of the Dawson Trail, along with archival images reflecting key moments in the history that marked the coming of the road through our communities. The museum has since added the Red River Cart and the beautiful shelter that surrounds it. At marker number 5 in Richer, we speak to the characteristics of an area once known as Coteau des Chênes, or Oak Ridge, Coteau à Cheval, and eventually Thibaultville, so named after the Bishop Thibault. Coveted for its small game, firewood, and lumber, Métis living here in the 1840s were joined by Métis and French-Canadian lumberjacks from St. Boniface in the winters of 1861 and 1862 to harvest oak and elm to build the early St. Boniface Cathedral. The area boasted a high point on which the Enfant Jésus Church was built in 1910, a building now known as the Dawson Trail Museum. Moving westward on the trail, we arrive at a large and beautiful 15-foot wheel. This art installation was commissioned by the Dawson Trail and created by James Culleton. It celebrates the history of the corduroy roads that were built along much of the original trail. It's one of the stars of our trail, so be sure to check it out. From this point through to the town of St. Anne, trail markers show the beaver icon, for this is an area once traditionally known by the Anishinaabe as Mistamistcano, or the Great Beaver Way. There are many stories to be told here in this area, where the construction headquarters once stood, so we commissioned a triptych or 3-panel art mural by artist Dave Carty for the Thurston Drive Park. This is also where we learn about the dunking of the road superintendent in the fall of 1869 in the nearby Coulée des Sources by Teamsters, led by the infamous Thomas Scott, who would later be executed on other charges by Louis Riel and his provisional government at Fort Garry. It was 2 strapping Métis brothers named Harrison or Addison who saved the superintendent from drowning here. Even so, John Snow had made enemies in the area, and when he returned to the area, the community would not have it. Métis leader Augustin Nolin of St. Anne took him to Fort Garry and accused him of several crimes, including selling liquor to First Nations in exchange for land. There were tensions in this area from the start of the road construction. This was fueled by the arrival of Orangemen from southern Ontario who had been hired over local residents to work on the trail. There are disturbing accounts of these road workers breaking into Métis houses and taking them over for long dancing and drinking parties. The terrified women and children were held prisoner and prevented from escaping for help. This was, arguably, the beginning of the reign of terror for the Red River Métis. Don't miss Marker 7 at the New Prue family development along La Coulée. It is located on a piece of land that has been designated as a park and is nestled along the creek. It's no surprise that Anishinaabe and Métis families set up camp along the road and the forest in this area for the woodcutting and hunting. Not far from here, a Métis road allowance community existed in the late 1800s, called La Vallée des Tuyaux, or the Stovepipe Valley, referring to the stovepipe used to heat their tents. As you leave La Coulée along the Dawson Trail heading towards St. Anne, you can appreciate the change of scenery that has come to be known as where the forest meets the prairies. The Anishinaabe and Métis had their dwellings at the edge of this forest. It was their hunting paradise, and the lush flora and fauna at the time is the main reason this became a favored wintering camp for their communities. At the heart of the Dawson Trail in the town of St. Anne is where we introduce Anishinaabe chief Nasaki Binez, or Flying Downbird, better known by his hereditary title Grandes Oreilles, or Long Ears. Following the Red River flood of 1852, many Métis and French Canadians fled the Red River Valley for this area, which they named Grande Pointe des Chênes, or Big Oak Point. Nasaki Binez concluded the first land purchase agreement with the Métis and French Canadians at this time through Bishop Provencher, insisting a formalized agreement was needed for expansion of their group as overhunting was already a problem. Chief Nasaki Binez, initially with the Rosa River Band, led the Fort Garry or Oak Point Band, names which reflect the seasonal encampments here and at the Forks in Winnipeg. He was the son of Chief Grandes Oreilles the Premier, one of 6 Nahiawak or Plains Cree and Anishinaabe chiefs who made the Selkirk Treaty in 1817, bringing peace to the Red River settlement 50 years earlier. Onward to Marker 9, just a short distance west along the Dawson or Central as it is known through town. The marker sits across from the original St. Anne Hudson's Bay Depot, which was built in 1871, the same year the road officially opened to the public. Back in 1869, underpaid Métis road workers went on strike amid the Red River resistance. When a paymaster, Charles Mayer, refused to pay them for idle time, some threw him into the Seine River at this location before chasing him out of the settlement. It was the first organized industrial strike in the Northwest. Métis residents had been ignited with rage at this time, as existing property boundaries and the river lot system was being ignored by surveyors and other representatives appointed by the Dominion of Canada, including John Snow, then superintendent of the Dawson Trail's construction. He and his men plowed out claims for large tracts of Anishinaabe land on which the Métis were living. Times were dire, so it was easy for him to swindle people into signing off land for food and whiskey, papers he would later conveniently lose when charged for selling liquor for land. One of the most remarkable discoveries we unveiled in our research, and that we speak to at Marker 9 in the town of St. Anne, is that the first recorded confrontation of the Métis objecting to the Dominion Land Survey by stepping on the surveyor's chain occurred on Lot 60 at Olivier Ducharme's land not far from here. They told Colonel Stoughton Dennis, who was leading the survey team, to not put his feet on their land if he wished to keep his head on his shoulders. Followed by a similar incident in Saint Vital that is well documented, the Red River resistance was sparked. Many of the paintings shown on our landmarks are treasures, some having been lost or forgotten among the relics of time, and some having never been linked to the history of the trail until our efforts. We are grateful once again to our heritage consultant, Mireille Lamontagne, whose thorough work and research led to the recuperation of these gems as the perfect complement to the Dawson Trail Interpretive Trail. Another rumor that we were able to confirm is that of Riel's unresolved land claim just south of Dufresne Elevator along the Dawson Road in the RM of Taché. Riel staked a claim on the outside limits of the parish of Lorette in 1869. It was never incorporated into the river lot surveyed by the Dominion Land Surveyor, even though their notes confirmed they were aware of it. Riel himself had written a letter to his mother while in exile asking that his cousin André No go plow a few acres so there would be no confusion before the government started digging a canal. This is commemorated at Marker 10. A quote from the New Nation newspaper in 1870 provides an insight into the Métis community's sentiments at the time. We may be a small community and a half-breed community at that, but we are men, free and spirited men, and we will not allow even the Dominion of Canada to trample on our rights. Onward to Marker 11 highlights. Petite Pointe de Chêne, or Little Oak Point, is where the Métis freighters would let their horses and oxen graze upon the lush banks of the Seine River. The Métis inhabitants arrived here in the 1860s, descendants of voyageurs and buffalo hunters. They made a living trading furs and cutting wood and were apparently known for their expert construction of the trail's corduroy bridges. Further east at Marker 12, we speak of Métis leader Elzéar Lagimodière, who became the first reeve of the municipality, and despite lacking any formal schooling, earned the high honor of military advisor to the provincial government of Manitoba. He signed documents with an X. We know that the Lagimodière family had deep roots in the Lorette area. Jean-Baptiste Lagimodière Jr., known as La Prairie, lived in Lorette from 1865 to his death in 1886. He was the eldest son of Jean-Baptiste Lagimodière and Marianne Gaboury, the first woman of European descent to travel and settle in Western Canada. They were also, in 1812, the first settlers at the Red River Colony near modern-day Winnipeg, Manitoba. The early Lagimodière couple are also grandparents to Métis leader Louis Riel. At the west end of Lorette, or Petite Pointe des Chênes, at the Red River Co-op, is another major interpretive exhibit of the commemorative trail. This one features the ox silhouette in front of the Red River cart. The ox is adorned with a traditional voyageur sash as a nod to the Métis kinship, and features 4 interpretive panels, all themed around the contributions of the Métis people, the ingenuity of the Red River cart, and the freight trails across the western prairies. Brewing tensions between the Métis and the Northwest Immigration Aid Society, co-organized by the infamous paymaster of the trail, Charles Mayer, are well documented at Marker 13 in Prairie Grove. This society started moving Ontario immigrants, Protestant Orangemen, onto lands designated as Métis settlements, stirring conflict. Among the paintings found to support the Dawson Trail history is this 1870 painting by artist William Armstrong, courtesy of the Orator Galleries in New York, that captures one of the paradoxes of the Red River Resistance of 1869 and 1870. Métis and Anishinaabe are seen hunting, freighting, and guiding for the Red River Expeditionary Forces sent to end the Métis resistance. Another great treasure that we were able to unveil thanks to Mireille's research and persistence, aided by the help of elders from Lake of the Woods, is the identity of the Ojibwe chief at the lake's northwestern point that Simon Dawson reported to have had the good fortune of meeting as he and his party got stuck in a swamp near the lake in 1858 as they attempted to trace an exploratory line for a road through the Canadian Shield and swamps to connect Fort Garry and Fort William. We now know that his name was Chief Powassan, a widely known leader and medicine man. He traveled all over the country, helping people with his gifts and knowledge. The two would meet again, notably as principal negotiators of Treaty 3 in 1873. And finally, at Marker 15, the terminus of the original trail in St. Boniface, our interpretive content makes a bold statement as to the impact of the road on Indigenous communities at the time. Here we share 3 quotes from prominent Indigenous leaders about the road that speaks volumes. Chief Peguis, Chief Nasaki Benez, and Métis leader Louis Riel. On January 1873, in the aftermath of the Red River Resistance, Louis Riel wrote, "We have been forced to defend ourselves against continual aggression. The Canadian employees opening the road to Lake of the Woods showed the true spirit of hostility which they hold towards the settlers of Assiniboia. They tried to seize the best properties. They claimed to have bought from First Nations. The next summer, Mr. Stoughton Dennis appeared as surveyor on the lands of private individuals. They demanded that he justify this unjust encroachment and forbade him to touch their lands. And several hundred men newly arrived, with John Snow and Dennis, whom they nearly all employed, boasted that they had come here in advance of Mr. McDougall as his soldiers, ready to support him by force of arms, which raised widespread alarm in the countryside." This concludes the key Indigenous highlights of our trail markers and exhibits. Please check out our map on the website at dawsontrailtreasures.ca and immerse yourselves in many more historical nuggets of the trail and the over 300 pages of information that we have pieced together here for you. Thank you all for your time, and as always, we'll look forward to seeing you on the Dawson Trail.